Jogging along Lake Michigan in July of 1985, Penny Ann BEERNSTSEN was brutally attacked and raped. After police presented her with a lineup, BEERNSTSEN chose Stephen Avery as the man that had attacked her. However, Avery had an alibi. Avery claimed he had been 40 miles away at the time of the attack and had a time-stamped store receipt supporting his alibi. But despite this, Avery was charged and later convicted for the rape and attempted murder of Penny BEERNSTSEN, landing Avery a 32-year prison sentence. 10 years into his sentence though, Gregory Allen, who was serving a 60-year rape sentence, made a shocking confession. He had been the man who raped Penny BEERNSTSEN. Incredibly, this was not enough as no action was taken. It would take 18 years of Avery maintaining that he was innocent before in 2002, DNA testing finally proved Allen, the man who had admitted to the crime, was in fact the rapist. Avery left prison in September of 2003 a free man at last and received $400,000. His time in prison left him with an estranged family, a divorced wife, and 18 years of lost time, and yet it would only get worse. In 2005, photographer TERESA HALBACH disappeared. Her last appointment had been a meeting with Avery at his home. Her vehicle was later found on Avery's salvage yard with Avery's blood inside the car. Worse for Avery, fragments of HALBACH's bones were also found in a fire pit near Avery's home. Avery claimed though, and has maintained since, that he was framed by the Manitowoc police. An evidence bag with Avery's blood collected as part of Penny BEERNSTSEN's investigation from 1985 had been unsealed and punctured as if someone had stolen Avery's blood. This may explain why Avery's blood was found in HALBACH's car. It was also found that the Manitowoc police had repeatedly searched Avery's property and partook in the investigation, despite having been ordered by a judge to have no part in the case. Interestingly, it was in fact a deputy from the Manitowoc Police Department that would end up finding HALBACH's car key in Avery's bedroom. This came after multiple previous searches had turned up nothing. The key would later play a large part in the trial in incriminating Avery, which many believe was planted evidence used to frame him. In March of 2007, Avery was found guilty for the murder of TERESA HALBACH and has spent the past 10 years once again behind bars. Sadly, his entire compensation from the first trial has been completely lost to fight his current case. Avery is now out of money with little hope. On March 24th of 1985, Michele Mallin, a Texas Tech University student, had just parked her car when she was approached by a man, forced back into her car and raped. The rape was one of numerous similar attacks in the area by an attacker known as the Texas Tech Rapist. Police would later present Mallin with an identity line where she picked out Timothy Cole. Despite multiple testimonies that Cole had been studying in his apartment at the time of the rape, Timothy Cole was arrested. While there was no physical evidence tying Cole to the crimes, Cole was eventually convicted by a jury as the Texas Tech Rapist. Cole was sentenced to 25 years in prison. This all came despite Cole not matching the description, him never having been in trouble with the law, and the fact that he had severe asthma while the attacker was believed to have been a heavy smoker. After just 10 of those 25 years, a shocking confession came when fellow prisoner Jerry Wayne Johnson confessed to being the Texas Tech Rapist. Incredibly, it was revealed that Johnson had actually been a suspect to begin with. He had been arrested for rape just 3 days after Cole. It is inexcusable that the connection was not made, as his behavior and description matched the Texas Tech Rapist to a T. Even worse though is that the confession came after the statute of limitation had run out and was subsequently met with no action. Cole remained behind bars. On December 2nd of 1999, Cole sadly died in prison during an asthma attack after spending 14 innocent years behind bars, 4 of which came after Johnson's confession. New DNA testing would confirm that Johnson had indeed been the rapist, and on February 6 of 2009, a Texas District Court judge announced to a 100% moral, factual, and legal certainty that Timothy Cole did not commit the rape. Cole's record was later cleared in what was the first DNA exoneration in the history of the state of Texas. On November 5th, 1983, after responding to a call, Shreveport police found store owner Isidore Roseman dead from a gunshot to the head. Almost immediately, police began to look at a man named Glen Ford, the victim's yard man, as a suspect. He was suspected to have been in the area during the time of Roseman's murder, and while police could not find any evidence linking Ford to the murder, they did find pawn shop receipts in his name. When asked what the receipts were for, Ford admitted to having stolen jewelry from the victim and selling the stolen items at a local pawn shop. Although all this proved was that he had stolen from Roseman, police saw this as evidence enough to charge Ford with the murder of Isidore Roseman. This was the beginning of what would ultimately become an extremely flawed case. Because Ford wasn't able to afford a lawyer, he was issued 2 attorneys by the state, both of which would prove to be severely underqualified. To make matters worse, the jury was purposefully selected to be made up of only whites, despite Ford residing in an area of at least 50% African Americans. This was done in the fear that a black juror would be less prone to consider the death penalty against a fellow black man. A key to convicting Ford came from the testimony of a witness. This witness recalled events that would prove to have extreme consequences for Ford. Ford was ultimately found guilty after just 3 hours of deliberating and was sentenced to death. Shockingly though, this witness that had just incriminated Ford later admitted to her testimony being a made-up story and that she was pressured by police. It was also found that there had been key evidence withheld from the trial. Ford never stood a chance. He would go on to spend nearly 30 years in solitary confinement. Finally, in 2014, this would all change. Jake Robinson came forward and admitted to the murder. Ford was exonerated in March of 2014, making him the longest-serving death row inmate in U.S. history. According to Louisiana law, he was entitled to roughly $11,000 for each year he served, coming to about $330,000. However, prosecutors maintained that Ford had to have known that the robbery that led to the murder that night was taking place, and because they believe he knew but didn't inform police, he was not entitled to the money. Shortly after his release, Glen was found to have stage 4 cancer. On June 29th of 2015, Glen Ford died with nothing to his name. He lived his last months off of charity, and his funeral cost had to be covered by donations. On Halloween morning of 1981, Sister TEDEA BENZ was raped, stabbed, and strangled to death in her St. Francis bedroom in Amarillo. This crime closely resembled a murder case of Narnia Bryson from 4 months earlier, leading police to believe that these crimes were committed by the same person, as they were eerily similar. After fingerprints were found in the room of Mrs. BENZ, a mentally disabled man by the name of Johnny Garret became a suspect. Only 17 years old at the time, Garret was a severely mentally impaired man who had been horrifically abused most of his childhood life. He claimed he had broken into the church to steal a radio in an unrelated instance explaining the prince. Upon being interrogated though, police claimed Garret had confessed and then later refused to sign his confession. These claims were completely denied by Garret, who maintained that he never confessed to anything. At the scene of the crime, hair was found and tested, and this would later seem to be in favor of Garret, as the hair did not match that of his. The hair was black while his was brown and seemed to come from a Latino male, while he was Caucasian. Shockingly though, he was found guilty for the murder of Sister TEDEA BENZ and sentenced to death. Interestingly, he was not found guilty for the second murder of Narnia Bryson. After the Supreme Court rejected 2 separate appeals, on February 11th of 1992, after a third appeal and 11 years behind bars, Johnny Garret died by lethal injection at the age of 28. His last words were, "I want to thank my family for loving me and taking care of me, and the rest of the world can kiss my ass." It would be 23 years before DNA found at the second crime scene of Narnia Bryson would reveal a new suspect, Leancho Perez Rueda. Rauda would later plead guilty to the murder of Narnia Bryson. Doing so almost certainly proved Johnny Garret's innocent. But despite the overwhelming evidence and the family of Johnny Garret fleeing to the state of Texas to reevaluate the case to bring closure to the family, they have been repeatedly denied and now even been forced to back off the case entirely by Texas officials. On April 9th, 1993, Gary Gogger called police after making the horrific discovery of his dead 74-year-old father's body. The McHenry County Sheriff's Department arrived on scene and soon after found the body of Gogger's mother, 70-year-old Ruth Gogger, in a nearby trailer on the same property. Almost immediately, police turned to Gary as a suspect, who in his initial statements told police that he had been asleep while his parents had been murdered. Despite this though, Gogger was interrogated for a grueling 21 hours. Officers went as far as lying to Gogger, telling him that they had found evidence against him. Gogger claims that they told him that they had found bloody clothes in his bedroom with a bloody knife in his pant pocket. After showing Gogger gruesome photographs of his dead parents, Gogger finally broke down and confessed. Though Gogger had no memory of the crime, he believed what police had told him and believed he must have had a blackout and really did kill his parents. Though he had given his confession, there was still no physical evidence held against him in court. Gogger was found guilty for the double murder of his mother and father and was subsequently sentenced to death. Gogger would spend nearly 2 years in prison and 9 months on death row before the 2nd District Illinois Appeals Court unanimously reversed and remanded the case to set forth a new trial. This was on the basis that the confession couldn't stand, as it shouldn't have had grounds to begin with. Without the confession, the murder charges were forced to be dropped, setting Gary Gogger free. In 2002, 2 gang members were ultimately convicted of the crime and Gogger was pardoned. Gogger has been denied the right to any compensation despite being falsely imprisoned.